Denver's story as a built environment begins with geography and circumstance. In 1858, gold was discovered in the Cherry Creek area, and within months, the settlement that would become Denver emerged at the convergence of Cherry Creek and the South Platte River. The location was not arbitrary. The river valleys provided water and transportation routes, while the surrounding plains offered space for expansion. The city rose at the edge of the Rocky Mountains, positioned between the mining camps of the high country and the agricultural lands to the east. This geography would shape not only where Denver grew, but how it grew. The earliest Denver of the 1860s was a frontier town of log cabins, canvas tents, and hastily constructed wooden structures. As the mining boom intensified and the city's population swelled with prospectors, merchants, and workers, the architectural character began to shift. By the 1870s and 1880s, brick and stone replaced wood as building materials, both as a practical response to fire risk and as a reflection of the city's aspirations toward permanence and respectability. Victorian commercial blocks rose along Market Street and 16th Street, their ornate facades and castier details reflecting the architectural tastes of the eastern United States, which Denver looked to as a model. The arrival of the railroad in 1870 proved transformative. Denver's connection to national rail networks secured its role not merely as a mining camp, but as a regional hub for trade, finance, and transportation. The economic security that followed allowed for more ambitious building. Banks, hotels, and government buildings grew larger and more architecturally refined. The city's central business districts solidified, and neighborhoods began to develop distinct characters based on proximity to employment and social status. Working-class neighborhoods clustered near rail yards and industrial areas, while residential districts for merchants and professionals extended outward. Along new streetcar lines, the turn of the 20th century brought the City Beautiful movement to Denver. Architectural historians note that this urban design philosophy, which emphasized grand civic spaces, coordinated architectural standards, and planned streetscapes, influenced Denver's development significantly. The 1906 Civic Center plan introduced a formal arrangement of public buildings around a central plaza. Drawing inspiration from classical principles and monumental civic design, the buildings of this era, including the Capitol, the City and County Building, and the Public Library, employed Beaux-Arts and Renaissance Revival styles that projected civic pride and permanence. Throughout the early 20th century, Denver's neighborhoods developed according to patterns common to American cities of its size and era. Residential streetcar suburbs expanded outward, characterized by single-family homes with front porches and modest architectural detailing reflective of craftsmen, Queen Anne, and classical revival styles. The wealthy established neighborhoods like Capitol Hill and Country Club, where larger homes sat on generous lots. These districts became architecturally cohesive not by formal regulation, but through shared expectations and economic sorting. Meanwhile, immigrant communities established their own neighborhoods, such as the Italian neighborhood near Highlands and the Greek and Eastern European communities elsewhere, where vernacular building types and neighborhood-scaled commercial districts reflected cultural traditions. 1920s and 1930s saw the rise of Art Deco and streamlined modern styles in Denver's commercial buildings. These styles, with their geometric forms, bright materials, and forward-looking aesthetic, appealed to a prosperous city that saw itself as modern and progressive. The 1930s Great Depression slowed construction significantly, though some WPA-funded public buildings from this period remain important examples of modernist government architecture. After the Second World War, Denver experienced substantial growth. The post-war boom brought new construction materials, new building techniques, and new planning approaches. Downtown was increasingly dominated by mid-rise and high-rise office buildings in the international style. With their steel frames, glass curtain walls, and emphasis on pure geometric form, simultaneously, rapid suburban development pushed Denver's residential growth outward. Following patterns enabled by automobile ownership and federal housing policies, these suburban neighborhoods, developed at lower density than earlier streetcar neighborhoods, created a dispersed urban form that would continue to characterize Denver's growth. The 1970s and 1980s brought economic growth tied to energy industries and increased migration from other regions. The downtown skyline changed dramatically as taller office towers rose. Architectural styles shifted toward postmodern experimentation and then toward contemporary minimalism. Historic neighborhoods closer to downtown began processes of renovation and reinvestment. Their older housing stock and established streetscapes, becoming attractive to new residents and investors. Throughout these transformations, records suggest that Denver's architecture reflected larger American patterns while maintaining character rooted in its specific history. The prominence of stone and brick construction, inherited from the 19th century, influenced how the city felt different from regions where wood frame or stucco predominated. The wide streets and gridded blocks established in the city's early years persisted even as building heights and densities changed. The presence of the mountains on the horizon remained a constant visual fact, shaping how the city's architects and planners conceived of urban form. Today, Denver's architectural landscape is a layering of these historical periods. 19th century commercial blocks stand near early 20th century civic buildings and mid-century office towers. Historic neighborhoods preserve streetcar domestic architecture alongside new infill development. The city's architectural identity is not defined by any single era, but by the accumulated choices made across its 150-year history. The buildings of Denver's past continue to structure how the city functions and how its residents move through space. The downtown grid established in the 1860s remains the organizing principle of the city center. The neighborhoods defined by streetcar routes and early 20th century development. Patterns still define community identity. The civic institutions housed in Beaux-Arts buildings from the early 20th century remain anchors of urban life. Denver's architecture is its history made visible, a record in brick, stone, and steel of how geography, economics, technology, and human aspiration have intersected across time.